approve.
Okay, motion been made by Ellerhoff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Gal. Roll call. Ellerhoff.
Aye.
Gal.
Aye.
Gal.
Aye.
Kaufman.
Aye.
David, aye. Minutes. Any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Move to approve.
Oh,
Motion.
well, yeah.
No.
Okay, motion made by Bell. Is there a second? Motion. Second by Kaufman. Roll call. Bell.
Aye.
Kaufman. Aye. Gal. Ellerhoff.
Aye.
David, aye. Claims. Any additions or corrections to the claims as presented?
There's two administrative corrections going around,
Yeah,
I
two of
saw
them.
that.
Yeah.
and they have to do with two of the claims that were in there. One had a wrong vendor number set up, and the other was the wrong amount.
Move to approve.
Okay, motion been made by Ellerhoff. Is there a second motion?
Second.
Second by Bell. Roll call. Ellerhoff.
Aye.
Bell.
Aye.
Kaufman.
Aye.
Gal.
Aye.
Gilbert, aye. Brandon Wood, stand up.
Front and center.
You're number one. You're the first one. We're recognizing the employees 5, 10, 15, 20 years and that. And we have a certificate for you for 5 years of service at Cedar County that we'd like to present to you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Congratulations.
We appreciate your
Yep.
service. Keep it up.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate that. I think this is a great thing. So, very well appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Maybe we'll get
Thank
you
you,
a frame
Brian.
for that, Brian.
Oh, Grandma's ordered.
Thanks for coming in, Brian.
You bet.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank you.
everything. Keep up the good work.
Okay, Stanwood Drainage District, we'll go into that one. We'll have that call at 9 o'clock. Secondary road proposed facility plan, Rod is working on that. Any committee reports? Betty?
No.
Brad?
Nope.
John?
Had a Limestone Bluffs RC&D meeting last night. Probably spent the most time on two items. One being the services agreement with the University of Iowa. They've pretty much got knocked down to just about 2 or 3 items. One has to do with the intellectual property rights and a project, and we still have Nick negotiating with the U on that. And basically, what we're looking for is that the university's involvement doesn't mean that they have all rights to everything when the project's done. So we're going to try to keep some of the marketing things in place that would stay with that project. So that's one of the items that we're negotiating on. One of the other hang-ups was on insurance. They did have on workman's comp, they lowered it to our limits. Commercial liability was lowered to our limits. We don't have any vehicles, so basically that shifts over to whoever the non-owned person is, non-owned vehicle, and whoever it is that's driving that. So, and then we have to add the University of Iowa as an additional insured to our policy, but there's nothing in there which we're looking for that basically has us, basically they don't want us to be able to subrogate and go after them, but there's nothing that states how their folks are covered, so we want to make sure that's in there. So once that those changes are made, we had a tentative approval of that to be signed when those are made. We once again talked about Warren Johnson retiring from the Iowa League, and how that position would be handled in the future. There's talk about hiring a new part-time to replace him. The other ideas were have an existing RC&D take on the role, have an existing director finish out the projects, and then for new ones, they would bounce those over to other RC&Ds. Then there was the idea of finish out those projects with the existing director, and then continue the league as a social networking organization. There was an idea to finish out the existing commitments and dissolve or move to dormancy at the state level. And then there was also the idea of rotating it between RC&Ds and make that state position on the rotating deal. So we talked a little bit about that. Then once again, our regional food system working group coordinator was not there. She got lost last time coming from Dubuque. This time she was supposed to come and she didn't make it, so I don't know whether she got lost again or what. But the other item we spent quite a bit of time on was the budget. We're going to be we worked on a draft. We really didn't have something to bring back here because we just had her take notes and so forth. So she's working on the budget. Director's report. She's got the final report for Lido Creek done, which is submitted to WERB, and that's for $39,000. And ECIA just thought we had the money sitting in the bank for that and wanted their check right away. And so we've got to wait till that comes back, and I'm not sure they get all of it anyway. So anyway, that's finally done. The director met with some folks on the Maquoketa Art Experience, and there's talk of regional farmers market along with cultural experience things going on. Parks for People, they hired a group to come in and do some visioning for the 3-county region, and they want to make sure they keep the University of Iowa involved and the RC&D involved in that. The RCDI project is an education project, educating RC&Ds, and it's a 3-way. We're looking for some 3-way collaboration. I think I mentioned this last time, between the Iowa League, University of Iowa, and the Department of Cultural Affairs. There's some really neat stuff that they're talking about doing with historical stories and documentation and so forth. So some neat ideas that they're working on with that. And we do have some money coming in from 2 of our loans. Big Jim's is, of course, they're on schedule with theirs, but we are starting to get a little bit from a place to land. We did do the research and found out that we did have I believe a lien, or I don't know what it's, official lien. They didn't have the material last night on the equipment, so there's going to be we had that, and 1/2 of our spouse's 401k was promised. So we are going to send a letter and request that money. So that's about it.
Lien on the equipment that she sold.
Sold and gone.
And her spouse's at the time 401k.
Okay, Jeff, anything?
Community action tonight.
Well, yesterday morning I met with Carrie, and there was a guy from Homeland Security that was going through the courthouse, checking our security in the courthouse. Met with him for a while, and then in the afternoon I met with Gary, and Gary and I met with the auditors downstairs, going over the Stanwick Drainage District, how that's going to be handled and everything, working with them. In the afternoon I had the safety meeting with the judges upstairs. So the judges are concerned about the security in the courthouse, guns and everything else, so there's going to be recommendations coming from the judges upstairs. So.
Any idea what those might be?
Not right now. He's waiting for the report from Homeland Security too. And that Homeland Security person said that don't get the cart in front of the horse with this active shooter. He says you got to have a plan first before you really go into that active shooter course. So he says every department's going to have a plan made out of what happened to somebody shooting. So Carrie's got all the information, and she's going to pass it on. He's going to give her a recommendation and everything else. So we'll give that recommendation also to the judges up there, so they know what we're doing in the courthouse. Okay, Rob's coming back in, I hope.
Tuesday, I can tell the board that they have, the auditors coming in to, for a public hearing on the issuance of non-current debt for a loan for the purposes of rock expenditures like fire loan repayment, secondary road to the taxing refinement fund for Cedar Valley Golf Course urban renewal area. And then she's gonna certify tax increment finance debt for that and CDC. No, CDC. It's still going, anyway. Assessors coming in with family farm credit applications for action on those. And at 10 o'clock, the Stanwood Drainage District, Don Etler will be here, and the board will receive the bidding documents and construction plans for the improvement project. Set bid letting date and set time for public hearing on the plan.
What time's that coming?
10 o'clock.
10.
Does anybody else want a copy of this decision from the Department of Justice on the abatement of property taxes?
We'll put one in the file, my file.
Jeff wants one, a couple.
Morning again.
Hey, long time no see. Am I up?
Pull up a hot seat.
Sorry, don't interrupt. I have two things for you this morning. The first, I believe, is the first of this. We have another snowmobile club extending the route in Cedar County. This is Eastern Iowa Sledheads. I'm not familiar with them necessarily. It sounds like they're a state. You know more, John, on them?
I can't remember where they come from, the east or the west.
It sounds like they're hitting a lot of the counties, so almost, I guess it sounded like they're almost like a statewide deal. Could that be? The permit request came out of Lone Tree. Mr. Scott is who sent it in behalf. Basically, all they're doing in Cedar is extending from 290th Street and X40 south to all the way to the Muscatine County line. So it's just one stretch of road. It has come up in the past that we've had one individual along that route had some concerns, and then I followed up with, of course, the Winter Warriors, and they alluded to that's not their route. Well, from there, we got to this point, so we found out these are the people that like to run that as well. So obviously, as part of the protocol, they require to get a permit, just like any other organization would. Certificate of insurance is in order. Again, the route is just from X40 from 290th down, which again is, they're basically piggybacking on the Winter Warriors, the rest of their trails, the way I take it. Everything appears to be in order, so I would recommend approval.
Okay, what's the board's wish?
Second.
Okay, motion made by Bell, second by Gal. Any more discussion? Roll call. Bell.
Aye.
Gal.
Aye.
Elliot.
Aye.
Kaufman.
Aye.
And Gilbert, aye.
Nope, just one.
That's one.
Yep. Thank you. And the second thing I have for you is, obviously we had an agreement in place. This is just the formality of it, the contract for our Dixon Avenue FEMA project. We hired surveyor, came out, actually set the points. When that comes back, it's usually 100th or so of an acre difference, just because when you actually do the actual survey, it can vary. So I have a contract between Cedar County and Harry and Marcia Driscoll for right away that we need to purchase for our FEMA project on Dixon. Permanent easement, again, this is an example, went from 0.35 original estimate to 0.38. So a unit rate of $9,517.13 for a payment of $3,616.51. And then there's two temporary easements. They own both sides of the road. So it'll be $100 on each side. So the total payment would be $3,816.51.
Move approved.
Okay, motion been made by Bell, is there a second motion?
Second.
Second by Ellenhoff, any more discussion? Roll call, Kaufman.
Aye.
Bell.
Aye.
Ellenhoff.
Aye.
Bell. Aye. And Dearborn, aye.
It's crazy. This year just
You're
flew by.
gone.
I know. I have good news and bad news.
It's good news first.
The good news is we don't live in Buffalo, New York.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Bad news?
The bad news is they're talking a chance of ice tonight and tomorrow. Obviously, you'll be watching it, but
Tonight?
yeah, or Friday night. I'm sorry, Friday night and a Saturday, and then the temperature's supposed to come up and then turn in. We're supposed to get an inch plus of rain on Sunday. So right now the guys are out. We're hauling sand with our trucks, and then the blade guys are out clipping edges and trying to pull what rock and windrows they have left to work across in anticipation of that. So. Working diligently, like I said, obviously we didn't expect this cold snap and weather to come as soon as it did. Coupled with that, our 205th Street bridge that's going on out here. Contractor is still working. He got into a borrow pile, which is good because you can dig it right there on the site. He bought from the property owner on the north. The east side is pretty much up to grade. The west side is what they're working on, and that's what he needed the 3,000 yards of borrow for. We're still going to try to get it done. Mother Nature's going to have a huge say in that, but he is still working, and we're still plugging forward trying to get it open. So if we get it up to grade, obviously you're not going to seed it this time of year, but you can get, if you can finish grade it, which I actually do need some warmer temperatures for him to be able to work that surface, we'll get the rock on it, and then the next piece of that puzzle would be the guardrail. The newer standard, you have your wood posts on the very end of the bridge, but they also have steel posts, which is a good thing because you can obviously drive that easier than you could wood into that. So we're moving forward. The contractor is working, so we'll try. We're in hopes of getting that open, but there is, I hate to say it, the possibility that could, if it doesn't turn on us and get us some warmth, may end up. He'll do as much as he can, and we have to wait till spring to finish it.
So it'll be closed all winter.
Possibly. Don't want it that way, but I mean, as far as blade operator, that was a 3-ton bridge before, so that's not going to affect his route as far as, but obviously the public going through, not having it as an option would be a difference. But
You're going to let him move that house forward today?
house is supposed to be, yeah, today. Actually,
They're not going over that bridge, are they?
no, it's actually going through the field to the north for quite a ways, and then I think the address is 845 Kelly Avenue is where by that area they're going to get on the road. Come down Kelly to 205th, over and then into the site, which is just west of this bridge.
Who's doing the moving?
Goodwin?
Oh, yeah, from Washington?
Yep.
Yeah.
The other guy went broke.
That's my understanding. He's no longer in business.
Yeah, that's
Patterson,
right.
yeah.
So I moved the Miller house over there.
Yep, he moved those other two. Had the TV show
Yeah.
about it, the church in South Bethel Church, is that what it was? The name of it? Yep. So yeah, we're gonna, I mean, the plan is we're gonna haul sand today and tomorrow. I guess I don't know if I told you that. We had their sand quotes. We went with Wendlane out of a stockpile in Muscatine at $3 a ton. And then Acme was second at $3.50. And then Kroll just didn't have any, they had state sand out there, but he doesn't have any commercial grade sand that'll work. And he understood.
Will Kroll have that eventually?
Really what it comes down to is the commercial sand is rejected state sand, is how I look at it. It just doesn't quite meet the state commercial or state spec for concrete, so they end up creating a secondary pile, which is a benefit for us because it's essentially a waste product at that point. You can use it in a commercial mix. It's just on these state jobs you can't. It just doesn't quite reach the gradation that's required.
Because somebody said Kroll built a great big building out there by their sand.
Yeah, that's from the way I understand it. It's for fly ash or slag.
Yeah, fly ash.
Yeah, they're gonna. I think it is fly ash. They're planning on
Mix
storing
that
in
with
that.
sand?
I assume they'd mix it out there and then haul it to the plant. But I don't know that for a fact. You'd have to ask Kroll, but that's my assumption. Yeah, it's a pretty big structure. So they're investing quite a bit in the concrete side of things.
Did you guys put all the wing posts on already?
No.
No?
No wings. We were gonna do it today and tomorrow, because originally this rain on Sunday was forecasted to be snow, which would have been 5 to 7 inches. So the plan was to haul as much sand as we could, because it's better on the trucks to be light. But now that they're talking nothing heavy till Thanksgiving, which again I'm really hoping misses us as well, but they're talking, I'm showing 4 to 8 inches Thursday and Friday of Thanksgiving. But again, that's how this Sunday was. So I'm hoping, plan for the worst, hope for the best, continues to semi-work. But, salt, we are full. We got our 400 ton that we ordered. It came in bulk this week. We were getting a truck here, a truck there before that, but then we were able to get just Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We got the rest of it in. So our plan is to go. Basically, I told them as soon as they get, and we just talked about this morning. When we get down 100 ton, we'll put in an order for 100, because we don't know the uncertainty. Usually I like to get half gone, but I just don't want to risk running out. So the sketchy supply and everything I've been hearing, I want to try to keep us as full as much as possible. And there's a couple of vendors that, well, one for sure I know of that is in the community here with his truck, so we actually talked about trying to work that out better. If he's coming back, I mean, load's 25 ton, so if we can work it out, put it on the pad and then keep it up just to try to keep full. And we are adding that calcium pellets again this year, so the goal is, as long as I was told there's a shortage of that as well, but we'll use that instead of the liquid calcium. We used to do that years ago, understanding. We kind of started doing it again after with the shortage. The guys really liked it. Doesn't cake that sand salt mix near as much, keeps that workable, keeps the chunks out of it. So we'll continue with that program as long as that supply is available, but at the same time we will have a supply of liquid, heaven forbid the other one dries up.
Heard anything on your truck chassis?
They're talking January, and ironically the box orders are going to be right about the same time. So that's the latest I have on those. Starting budget here shortly, and actually I did start it already, just the formality of Excel spreadsheet and stuff. So we'll be working towards that.
On budget, we're going to have budget work days on that. And
Okay.
It won't start till probably the second or third week in January.
Okay.
We'll just meet all day long and we'll get all the budgets done in a couple days.
Okay. Yeah, and not that if you could push me back towards the end as much as possible, I'd appreciate it. I know probably they all say that, but
To Bev and Carrie, they're going to make the schedule.
okay. I try to do that, winter has a lot to do with how my budget's going to shake out, so if I can do my year-to-date, at least through December, it'll help me out a little bit as far as trying to really, still a crystal ball, but try to get a little more accurate as far as what my ending fund balance would be for the year.
Okay.
But no, I have started on it, and a couple other things I'll talk about in the near future, I hope. So, all right.
Fine.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, let me know Tuesday. I know they have that meeting Tuesday, but they haven't, to my knowledge, I've said in Corval, but not where yet.
She's got a sheet on it, I'll bring it in.
Okay, thank you.
Brad, was that sheet in the first pile that you handed back to me? Or
Second.
just one around?
I think.
I'll find it, or I'll look on the email.
You got paper to pass around for all these bankers to sign in. Bob's bringing a whole pile of money in already, see?
Yeah.
All right.
How are you, Bob?
Good.
Are we supposed to call? Hudson, or is he going to call us?
I think we're supposed to go.
Supposed to call him. Okay.
Oh, what?
I gotta go to this Lincoln Cemetery out in the middle of nowhere, and I don't know where exactly it's at. I'm supposed to lead you through. That's why I'm dressed down.
Is it a work day, or are you just
No,
investigating at this point?
getting a bid.
Ah,
It's beyond what individuals can do. Probably
What
200
township
tree.
where?
Lynn.
What township?
Well, you know where George Snyder's live?
Yeah.
You know?
Trying to think.
Ron,
this is-
That's
well,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
Ron
okay,
Snyder.
but-
Right behind Ronnie's.
Just
You
south
go
of
over
that.
this
The old dirt
little,
road.
little bridge over thing, is that the
No,
one?
no, that's in the same neighborhood.
Okay.
There's two of them right there.
Okay, so that's the
There's
other
another
one.
one, yeah.
An old dirt road that used to go through there.
What's that?
No.
Yeah,
Are
there's
you
no
a banker
road.
back there? And you're,
Glenn Hay from Community State Bank.
okay, you'll come up the front up there, because we're gonna have a conference call with
Is that the one
Jim
you-
Hudson.
Good.
And that way you'll be able to hear better if you wanna
And
sit
I
in the
have
front
a
row there.
Sounds great.
sheet here for people to
Trying to-
sign,
what's
if
the
or if you
easiest
could
way to
tell me
go
what,
from
who you are
Kempton
and
to
what
there?
bank you're with. Thank you. I know some of you, but
When
not
do I
all.
get off 38? I guess it's,
I go out, with the Molly Williams. Go that way.
up,
And then we're out here, and it's,
no.
I'll show you. When are you leaving?
Well, I'm not going to tell one, so you can show me what we
I'll
leave.
show you.
Why, does that used to be your route?
Ran them all.
Oh, okay. All right. Just don't get me lost.
That's the
Are you
easiest
gonna
way.
trust him?
Hey, well,
To get you in the right place?
Trust but verify.
There you go. Yeah. That's an always, isn't
We'll
it?
get you there.
Do you know Rodney von Munster?
Mhm.
He's the one that seems excited to bid on it.
He's a good kid.
Is he related how's he related to the von Munsters and
He's
like
related
Jim?
to Carrie. Carrie's nephew, I believe.
How about Jim? Like Jim up there north of Benton?
9 o'clock, thank
No,
you.
for sure. Right. I just know him, he's friend of Adam.
No, I.
Oh, so he's a young guy.
He's about Adam's age.
Oh, okay.
Joking.
Probably at 32
Oh,
or
okay.
34-ish, I would think, yeah.
Where's he from? Where does he live?
I think they live in Stanford, I believe. I think Stanford.
Okay. What's his dad's name?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Hi. Hello.
Morning. I'm well, how about yourself?
I'm all right.
I take it you're a banker
Yes.
with,
Citizens Bank.
and what's the name?
What's that?
What's the name?
Nick Rears.
Nick, okay. And there's a paper coming around too, Nick, that she wants signed also.
Yep.
Stepping in for Matt today, huh?
Yeah.
The US guy said he was coming over. And then we got Loudon. Liberty didn't know about it.
I know about it.
Yeah, okay.
I've called him twice, so. And I asked them to confirm with me, but nobody called me back.
Comes Gary. Come up front so you can hear what's going on, Gary.
He didn't hear you.
Come up front so you can hear what's going on.
I need 2 seats. Right there. I like this seat back here better.
I wanted that one up there.
Jim go on the line.
Why is the artist Barnard dead? He's a good. She one has a daughter that's a really good singer.
I'm not sure. Might be.
I want to see who her kids are.
Who is it?
Artist Barnhart.
You'll answer.
Yeah, Jill in West Branch.
You're kidding.
That would be
Your cell phone.
not good.
Pardon me?
When's the legislative bankers
The
meeting?
Board of Supervisors,
You know,
they're
I
giving you a
guess-
call
I'm
today.
not sure.
To talk
Coralville?
with
Or, yeah,
some
right,
bankers
okay.
here to talk.
Yeah,
at 9
that's-
o'clock. Please call
No, I don't know.
563-886-3168 as soon as possible. Thank you.
Maybe a little bit later in December.
Yeah.
Call you.
That's not his cell phone.
Nobody knows who used to have
Yeah. I wonder if I could call Don Etler's cell phone number.
Oh, he's checking the map, so that means he doesn't know the way out there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'll get back to the atlas again. Dixon Avenue.
That's right there. This Molly Williams.
Molly Williams,
Look to 185th.
so in the apartments corner.
Yep, go north from Blacktop.
Okay,
To 185th, that's 2 miles.
now just a minute. That's all, I just need to know where to turn off the pavement.
185th.
Off the Mechanicsville Blacktop, 185th, all right.
And go to Dixon, that's about 2.25 miles.
185th is right to Dixon?
Yep.
Yeah,
I
right.
can take you around this way if you want me to.
Cause then you turn right off of Dixon?
Yep.
At
And it's
Cedar
just,
County. I'm calling from the boardroom, they're in a public open session. We were trying to reach Attorney Hudson.
How many miles north of-
He was supposed to be
Mile and a half.
available by phone today
North
to
of
talk with
185th?
some bankers.
170.
Oh, that's
And
easy,
I'm
okay.
having trouble reaching the office, no one answers.
But he could have
Is
done that.
there any other contact you have for him for a cell phone?
That'll get you there. And it's right there.
Okay.
By Ron's house.
Yeah,
All right.
it's the field lane south of his house.
It's not a very big one, is it?
No.
It's really rough.
Oh, there's 200 trees at least.
How many days are there?
Well,
50?
is your office
Oh,
open just
no.
at 9 or, you know?
Maybe a dozen.
Really?
Just a small group of simple folks that live in a community around a little church up there.
There used to be a dirt road and they closed that years and years and years ago.
Yeah, that's why you gotta go through Ron's field.
Monthly new technology will also be senior fund traffic drops. A little bit or nothing, pretty much. It's crazy.
358-2675.
What are they gonna do,
Okay.
just clean it
Thank
up?
you very much. We'll
Is
give
that
that
what
a
you're
try.
doing?
In stages, yeah.
Lots of action stuff.
Lot.
His office opens at 9 and he's had some staff turnover. Let me try the office again.
Bet he has no idea what it was. Jeff.
What's that?
Try the
But he
office.
didn't know.
He told me
I
to
know
call
I
the
did.
office.
I bet she can go there on
And
her
I'll try
GPS.
I got that. I know where the other one is, I've been out that one time.
Yeah, that's great back there.
Yeah, it is.
That little bridge.
Cheryl, this is Beth calling from the Board of Supervisors. And Attorney Hudson was going to be available for a conference call this morning.
5 out of 5 days.
Please.
No, that isn't.
No, usually it's 5 out of 5 once a week. Yeah, once a week. Good. So where Eric from? He is southwest Minnesota kid. Okay. Married a local girl. There you go. Yeah, we look at our succession plan next week. So 6 people are just tired. Yes.
Would that road go through Cass Township? That blacktop, is that Cass Township?
Fortunately,
You mean the place for blacktop?
Yes, I'm going to transfer you to our conference phone. Oh, okay, let me transfer you. Okay, just a moment.
Yeah, it's Cass.
Good morning, Jim. Good morning,
Good morning.
Mr. Hudson.
Is everybody wide awake?
Yeah, are you?
I am. I
Okay.
don't have a secretary for the last 3-4 weeks,
Okay,
and the office is kind of messed up, but that isn't your problem. That's mine on this
that's
end.
right.
So
Okay.
sorry I missed you before.
In the room, we have 3 bankers, and we have the treasurer in here and the assistant treasurer, and we got the full board, and we also have some visitors in here. So what we would like to have you do is explain these warrants that you're talking about for the Stanwood Drainage District.
Do you want to make a motion
Sure.
to go into Stanwood Drainage District?
Okay.
Do you
Wait a
have
second,
Don
Jim.
Etler on
Hold
the
it.
line too?
Jim, hold it a second. We got to go into Stanwood Drainage District.
So moved.
Okay, motion been made by Ellerhoff. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Second by Bell. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're in Stanwood Drainage District. Okay, Jim.
What I call the best and easiest method to finance a drainage project is for the trustees, the supervisors in your instance, trustees, to approve payment of bills, just like you do for normal county transactions, and then have the auditor issue a warrant. And the Drainage Code provides for the issuance of stamped warrants, and that stamp has verbiage on it that says, in essence, don't cash this or present it for payment until you're notified. Those stamped warrants, I believe, we tentatively approved at 5% interest, and they can run for not less than 10 nor more than 20 years. What happens after that, on the flip side of that, once the project is completed, the final classification is done to determine the assessment for each individual landowner, and the levy is made. The landowners have 3 ways to pay their assessment. The first 2 are just like real estate taxes. One is all up front when they get the notice of levy, and it usually goes out the same time with real estate taxes to save a mailing. If they pay it all up front, then there's no interest on their part. Or they can pay it in 2 even installments, exactly like real estate taxes, fall and spring or spring and fall, no interest. The third method is to elect what's called a waivers, and what they do is the landowner waives any objections or irregularities and elects to pay whatever length of time, and I think the board could have set 20 years because this is a large project. And then they'll start in making payments, 20 installments. It is simple, not compounded interest for the landowner, and that would be at 5% as well. Once there's enough money in the pool, the warrants in the order that they were issued will begin to be paid off. The best analogy I have, maybe some of you banks have been familiar with anticipatory warrants for a government project where they anticipate the bond money coming in or the taxes being paid or whatever their source, if it's a revenue bond or a GO bond. Anticipatory warrants operate in just about exactly the same way. That they anticipate funds coming in and the warrants won't be paid until they come in. Warrants for the holder. I get paid warrants and I sell my warrants because I want the cash. For the holder of the warrant, it earns 5% interest until it's paid, and it is extremely secure. If drainage assessments are not paid on a timely fashion and become delinquent, the land can be sold exactly the same way as land is sold for delinquent real estate taxes. Scavenger sale, 3rd Monday in June. So they're extremely secure. They're also a good investment at 5% because they are federally tax-free, but taxable Iowa. Same taxability as a state municipal bond. So it's actually a little bit better return than 5% when you compute federally tax-free. That's the basics of warrants. It's what I call built-in financing. It is the system and method that I am most familiar with. I have a situation in Pocahontas County that's worth explaining to everyone. 3 years ago, Don Etler and I were involved in 5 or 6 very large projects in northwest Iowa. And we had about a project of $1.5 million in Pocahontas County. It was a pilot project for nutrient removal to get rid of nitrates and sulfur, which goes into the Mississippi River and into the Gulf of Mexico. And we knew we were going to be looking at a much larger amount of money. So we started to talk to several local banks about buying these warrants. And the more we thought about it and researched it, we suggested that Pocahontas County buy the warrants. I'm not certain how much money Pocahontas County has, but what they did have was the bulk of it in CDs, earning 0.5 to 3/4%. Pocahontas County is a totally different legal entity than this was Drainage District number 65. So it's appropriate for Pocahontas County to buy warrants from drainage districts in its own county. They started then 3 years ago, and they buy all of my warrants as an investment. So I never see them anymore. The auditor gives my warrants to the treasurer. The treasurer writes a check to me, and Pocahontas County owns them. The reason that came about was, and I want to be upfront with the 3 bankers, is the local banks didn't like the idea of being tied up so long, of 10 to 20 years on a 5% investment. If everybody had a crystal ball, they might like that. But they didn't want to be tied up for that lengthy time period with that type of financing. And the county didn't care. The county does so much of it that everything is pretty much staggered. Of course, they don't care about the tax exempt either because they're not a taxable entity. But that's what happens. And I've talked to your treasurer and auditor a little bit about that some time ago. If it's something that Cedar County wants to do, Cedar County could, buy up a good chunk of warrants. But that's entirely up to the treasurer as to how the treasurer determines to invest. That might be all you want to know about warrants. Have you shared Don Etler's letter as a little brief outline with everybody?
We got it here. We haven't shared it with everybody, but
okay. Well, what I just talked about is, a 5-sentence or 5-line paragraph, and I gave you. That's the method I'm most familiar with drainage districts.
Well, hey, Don or Jim, some of the questions that are being asked around is like, I know the treasurer checked on, say he wants to buy $500,000 or $1 million worth, and he would buy them. Would he be the first to be paid off then if he buys the original ones, and then if the bankers want to buy the second million, they'd have to wait until the first ones are paid off?
The warrants are generally paid off in the sequence of issuance, but you could let the bank in first if they want to be first.
Yeah. But
then the county be behind.
Do you have to pay them off that way?
No, you have the authority to adjust how you pay those warrants. Cedar County could be in secondary position to put the banks in a more comfortable position.
So in other words, if the treasurer would buy the first $1 million of warrants and he didn't want the money when it come in, we could pay off the banks then, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. If he bought the first 100 warrants,
Okay.
and a bank bought 101 through 200, or several banks together. Once you start getting assessments in, you could start paying off at 101 and just wait for Cedar County.
That would be up to the trustees of the Stanwood Drainage District?
Yes, I think you as trustees have the authority to determine how warrants are paid off.
Okay.
And you could do that to facilitate the transaction.
Right. But we don't have to make
Cedar
that
County
decision at
doesn't
this time, do we?
Pardon?
We don't have to make that decision now. We can do that when the money comes in, right?
No, because what you're saying, in essence, is Cedar County doesn't really care when they're paid off.
Well, we do if we need the money.
Well, you would hopefully have other resources, too.
Yeah, taxes.
You could sell them. The warrants are highly saleable. Saleable, I didn't say that very well. I have probably 10 or 12 very solid investors that want to buy my warrants. All of my warrants that come in from other counties, Pocahontas County doesn't buy because they don't want to step on other counties' toes. So those warrants, I turn around and sell right away to investors, and they're happy to buy them. They love the investment, in fact. It's a pretty good return in today's market with the tax exempt, and the security is as good as it gets. Actually, the bankers won't like this, but the drainage assessment would cut through a mortgage because it has the same legal status as real estate taxes.
Okay. Does any of the bankers have any questions?
Well, the warrants could be accelerated, could they not?
Did you hear that, Jim?
Well, not sure what you mean by that term, accelerated.
People,
if
the
assessments
could change
come
their
in
mind
faster,
and pay it off early, couldn't they?
Like a landowner, let's say I've got a $100,000 assessment, and you have some big ones in this project, and I elect the 20-year installments, and I make the payments 2 or 3 years, and in the 4th year I have a fantastic crop, and I'm looking for expenses. I could pay the entire balance off in the 4th year. I'm not, just like prepaying a mortgage, there's no prepayment penalty on these warrants, so I could go in the 4th year and pay it all off. And that happens. It just depends on and a farmer may be able to get 4% operating money, so he doesn't want a 5% obligation, and he comes in and pays it off. So from the landowner's standpoint, he can accelerate it at any time. From your viewpoint, as the bank that would hold the warrants, if you wanted to convert them, you of course can assign them to somebody else. You might have several bank customers that are looking for a big investment, and you could sell 100,000 off to them and liquidate yours. So there's some good flexibility with it.
Are these warrants in any certain denomination?
Well, is the press there?
Yes.
Well, don't print this part of it. How's that?
We've got our hands tied.
It used to be until last July that warrants could be issued in $1,000 increments. In July, they bumped it up to $5,000 increments. I will tell you, on 3 or 4 occasions, we had very large projects. In Palo Alto County a couple of years ago, we bought 100 acres at $1.25 million. And the auditor looked at me and said, "Jim, I don't want to sign 1,200 warrants, I said, "Well, you don't have to." We got together with the bank. There was a very large family bank that owned a number of banks, and they wanted to buy all the warrants because they owned some farmland in the district. And they agreed to it, so we made those warrants in $25,000 increments. And I think if both sides to the transaction agree, we can go up to higher increments. Otherwise, you're limited to $5,000. And you can print that, I don't care. It's common knowledge. I argued with the Iowa Drainage District Association committee that they really didn't need to up that from 1,000 to 5,000 because I had experience and done enough research that larger increments were okay. You just needed to get everybody's approval. The reason they don't like larger increments is, it takes a while to build up $25,000 rather than 1,000 to pay off the warrants. So they're slower to pay off when you put them in very large increments. But in that circumstance, the bank did not care a twit because they wanted the project to go through, and they owned land in the district, and they liked the long-term investment. So,
Jim, the reason we got the bankers here today is that, we had talked about we would like to keep this investment in Cedar County if we could.
Oh, sure.
But what you're saying, what I'm hearing from you is if nobody in Cedar County wants them, that you have a place that you could sell them?
Well, these big ones are a little bit of a tough sale, but, I have people that buy $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 warrants all the time. Now, they get into, $100,000 increments, or even 25, then, I had my brother-in-law for his mother, he bought 3 of those $25,000 warrants, $75,000. Her money was sitting idle in CDs at about 0.5%, and he just jumped on that. They don't expect to ever cash them. It's just an investment, a long-term thing for his family. So I think you can find investors. Investors around here are used to it and understand it. And in eastern Iowa, it's kind of a foreign thing and different. We also, for the bankers, that same project that was $1.5 million in Pocahontas County, where Pocahontas County bought warrants, also had some state funding. And in order to accomplish that, there had to be a bond opinion, which was written by Dorsey and Whitney, bond counsel in Des Moines, and they were amazed with the security of warrants. They hadn't dealt with them before. And I showed them all that stuff, and we got through that in good shape. Those loans were made through the Iowa Department of Agriculture. That aside doesn't add much to our conversation, but that's an indicator of how secure it is.
Okay, yesterday I met with our auditors for the county, and they wanted to know why we did not sell bonds instead and bond this whole project.
You can do bonds. I've never been in a project that has bonds.
Because the interest on bonds is cheap.
The bonds in a drainage project are just specific to the drainage district. Normal bonding, like a GO bond or a revenue bond for Cedar County, the entire county would pay for it. But drainage assessments are only paid by the landowners within the drainage district. And I guess the reason I've never been involved in bond financing is the warrants are so simple and easy.
Plus it's cheaper because you always got to have, for bonds, you always got to have a financial expert on it.
You'll have bond counsel, and you'll have then, some type of a brokerage that brokers money into the project.
And then your fees would be higher.
Oh, somewhat.
Yeah.
There'd be some more involvement that I wouldn't have with warrants. If you go the warrant system, the auditor just writes out the warrants as the bills come in, as the trustees approve it. Have any of the bankers had been involved with anticipatory warrants for like a city or county or state project?
Yes.
Yeah, Bob said he has.
It's a kiss and cousin to anticipatory warrants. But in anticipatory warrants, at the end of the day, they get the bond in and they pay off the warrants in a very short time period. These warrants will last, tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I think we already approved 20 years at 5%.
Correct.
So the landowners would know that they'd have a lengthy time to pay these. So that's what the lenders would be looking at, would be 20 years at 5%. Yes, I have my notes right here. Local preference, 5% at 20 years, and those are the two things you wanted to get accomplished.
Mainly because that was your recommendation at the time also.
Yeah. Well, this total project is, I forget the numbers again. I got them floating around, but it's well over $1 million, isn't it?
I think it's 2.1, isn't it?
So that's a very large project as these go.
I guess.
And yeah, you need to give the landowner the best that you can for them for financing. We tried to go lower than 5% in Palo Alto County a couple years ago. We tried to go to 3.5%, but we couldn't get good bids from contractors because they're the people that are going to get, $1.5 million of these warrants. We couldn't get good bids because they didn't have a lender behind them that they could sell those warrants to because the lender didn't like the 3.5%. So we bumped it back up to 5%. And in Palo Alto County, there are a couple of local banks that are buying the warrants. They've come to like them. And they could be 10-year versus 20.
Any questions from any bankers?
When you mentioned accelerated, and the landowner can accelerate, how does that affect our repayment on that? I mean, if a couple landowners decide to pay it all in year 3, does that get prorated around? Does it get to the whatever warrants you want it to go to? If it's you're talking 20 years on these warrants, does that mean I get X amount every year, or do I, how's the funds distributed if it comes in early?
What I typically see is the warrants are paid off in numerical sequence. When there's enough money to pay off, say warrant number 1, I submit a bill for $4,000, and they issue me a stamped warrant. And as the assessments begin to be paid, once they get enough for $4,000, they'll pay my warrant number 1. There'll be some small warrants, but then it won't be long and you'll be into very large warrants for construction. Those bills might come in $40,000 to $100,000 at a time. And if if 4 warrants are issued for $100,000, $25,000 increments, it'd be the order that they were issued. The entire warrant will be paid off at once, each individual warrant, not prorated spread across the entire. That would be an accounting nightmare for the auditor's office.
I guess your question was probably more set to the tone of if they're buying the 20-year and
right.
It's sold to their board as they're buying 20-year warrants here, and they kind of have that locked in, and then all of a sudden they come up in 3 years and are paid. What happens there? They're just out that other 17 years of interest.
Yeah, just like when a bond comes due,
Yeah, but with my bond, unless there's a prepayment, I know that bond's locked in for 10, 15, 20 years unless there's a prepayment in there. So in this, in theory, I could be paid off tomorrow.
Yes, they could be.
And I guess that would be something that we would have to work with Gary and you folks as far as, what Gary's goal is in this, which end he wants to be on, and then which end you folks would want to be on to, because like what he said earlier, if you folks were, buy the first ones, but you don't want to be paid off right away, and Gary doesn't care, we can jump those.
Sure.
Does the holder of that warrant have the right to refuse a payment and so they can go to the next one?
No, I've not ever seen that.
Okay.
The holder of the warrant, let me go back up a little bit, the provider. I would be a provider, the engineer's a provider, the newspaper for publishing notice, the contractors, the pipe suppliers, all those people are providers. The provider determines who buys his warrants. If I'm I'm the successful bidder and I'm going to get $1.5 million in warrants, I may have somebody lined up that wants to buy those. So the contractor would decide too. I mean, there's that wrinkle to it. But if the county's got this all lined up and I'm coming in as a contractor, I think I'd be delighted, because there aren't a lot of people out there that can handle that kind of money.
I thought the county had first choice on these.
Well, for mine they will. I would write them a letter and say, you buy all my warrants. I don't want to see them. I just want to check.
But
and
the contractor, sorry, Jim.
Holden Mink would be that way.
The contractor could have his own banker that he's going to work through, as opposed to any other options we have.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. The person who receives the warrant in payment for services or materials determines who gets the warrant. But I would be delighted as a large contractor if you'd say to me, we have several local banks and the county in line, so the day we issue the warrant, we can give you a check. I think that 9 times out of 10 people are going to like that. Probably a higher percentage than that.
They understood among the bankers?
Now, you said it's inconvenient, but it's certainly negotiable that the payments could be prorated, correct?
Well, I've never seen them prorated spread across. Like if there are 50 outstanding warrants and they get $500 in, that's going to be awfully difficult to do. Because the warrants aren't always in exact increments. You know, I might submit a $1,500 bill and get a $1,500 warrant. The big ones would be in larger increments, but publication of notice, maybe you pay the newspaper $600 in a warrant to publish notice of these hearings. You might be kind of already caught up, I don't know.
But the
I
county
think I've been paid all along.
But the county doesn't have the right to say, okay, we're going to pay the first $1 million worth of warrants. We don't have that right. The contractor or whoever holds the warrant has
Whoever
that?
holds them determines who can purchase them. But you're not going to have any trouble.
We were led to believe differently.
Yeah. I thought the county had the first right of refusal on them.
No. I've had that up in a couple of counties, and I just yielded to them because it was my warrants, and I didn't care who ended up with them.
Okay, any more questions?
I don't mean to throw a wet blanket on the lenders there, but
Gary, do you have
but I wouldn't. You can all buy mine.
Yeah, but you're a small minority of the whole project.
I know I don't amount to much money. The engineer is a lot more, and the contractor and supplier will be a lot more than that. And I don't think you can let bids based upon you must sell your warrants to 3 local banks and Cedar County. That's not a... But you can certainly talk to the contractor, the successful bidder, and say, or even at the bidding, that we have buyers lined up in our county that we prefer you use for selling your warrants. It's not a binding thing, but certainly it helps with bids.
Can we ask for their opinion on that before the bid is let, or before the bid is awarded?
Well, I think you can. I don't think you can make it binding, or you know, you can't do that. And you got public bidding policies and different things. If you were building a new swimming pool in Tipton, you wouldn't be able to do it that way, you know. But it's certainly a good thing to talk to the successful bidder about.
Yeah, but that successful bidder might not know anything about it until after he bids. And if he'd know about it before he bids, he might have a better bid.
Well, that's why I'm saying you could announce we have people locally lined up to buy your warrants if you don't have a market for them.
We can announce that before the bids.
Absolutely.
And that's probably
you just
why
can't make it a condition of the bid that they have to go with the local bank.
That's why we're having this meeting, is basically to ask the banks if they're willing, if they're interested, kind of get Gary's, when Gary decides where he's at with it, and then we can put a plan together so that when we do go out for bid, we have that ability to tell them, yes, we have 2 banks, we have 3 banks, we have 1, and the county are willing to step up and buy all of them.
And I think that is a wise thing to advise the bidders, because then they don't need to back away and be uncomfortable because they don't have a place for large warrants to go. I've had that experience up here where we didn't get some good bids or didn't get really good contractors because they didn't know what in the world they were going to do with over $1 million of warrants. But if you can assure all the bidders, we've got the entire project covered with local investors and the county if you want to use that.
So we can include language like that in the bid documents that go out.
Yeah, that'd be okay. I'd rather if you do a cover letter saying enclosed is this.
Right.
You might put it in the cover letter rather than the bid documents.
Right.
What I'd hate to do is to have some disgruntled bidder say that you made that a condition of the bid, because I know you can't do that.
Gary.
Did I hear you say the levying process would not start until the project is completed?
Yes. The drainage procedures and whatnot seem backwards to everybody except me, because I guess maybe I'm a backwards guy. But what happens is the entire project is completed. At the end of the completion of the project, because this is paid for by the landowners, each 40-acre parcel is determined to have a relative benefit, with the 40-acre parcel with the highest need for drainage compared to the 40-acre parcel with the lowest need for drainage. And then the assessments are based upon that. There is what's called a reclassification process. This entire drainage district was classified, help me out, board, several years ago.
Maybe 3-4 years ago.
So the classification is up to speed. We won't reclassify, but that schedule, the totality of the project will be plugged into that schedule, and each landowner will get an assessment based upon the existing assessment schedule. That assessment goes out once the levy's made and is payable with real estate taxes.
Yeah, my question is, let's say this project takes the whole year of 2015. So then we can't get reimbursed until the fall of 16?
Right. There'll be a big lag between the start of it until it's completed and assessments go out. Then once the assessments go out, each individual landowner has a choice. He can pay it all up front, half in the spring, half in the fall, or 20 years at 5%. He can choose any one of those three. It's his choice.
He pays no interest if he elects to pay twice yearly, just like real estate tax?
Exactly.
He pays no interest.
No interest. The drainage district stands that interest. usually in these drainage assessments, there's a built-in overage to cover a little bit of interest and, say, 10, 12 years of future maintenance and repairs. Most districts go a 3 to 4 year time period of spraying weeds and saplings, and so they put in, it wouldn't be unusual to have there be a 10% overage, although $200,000 seems like a lot of money on a $2 million project. Maybe there'd be $50,000 left in the drainage district funds. So then, when you do like a minor spraying project, you don't have to send out an assessment. You already have the money available. And from those overage funds, there would be some interest that the district would be paying, because there's a lag between the issuance of the warrants and the collection of the assessment. Does that answer your question?
I believe so, thank you.
Basically, all it would be is like you're locking, I mean, it would be a replacement for some of your CDs. You would know that you would not be able to turn that CD in.
But it's not liquid cash. You need a CD.
It is liquid because you can sell the warrant.
If you got a buyer.
Well, I'm sure you could probably get it sold.
Okay, any more questions for her?
So back to the warrant repayment. If I'm understanding you correctly, if I hold warrant number 1126 through 1253, there is potential I could not receive any payment on that up to, say, 10 years? I wouldn't get a payment every year, correct? I may have to sit on it for 10 years before I get any form of repayment back.
Yeah, all the warrants ahead of you would have to be paid first before you get paid.
But he'd be accumulating interest on his warrant, though.
Yes. It's straight interest, not compounded. Landowners like that. On the investment side, it's not quite as good.
Hopefully they'll buy the warrants then. They like it.
Well, if we pay landowners some damages, let's say we do construction outside of our right of way, and we do it in a time of year where they have growing crops, we pay them full fair market value for their growing crops. So we just give the landowner a warrant, you know. And we pay damages, that we pay everything with warrants. That's the commodity that we use, or the medium we use for payment. So a landowner could very easily end up with a warrant. We're going to acquire some additional right-of-way, I believe. Not very much. But right-of-way appraisers will determine that value, and you trustees will determine it. And when we pay for the right-of-way acquisition, we'll give those landowners warrants.
And those landowners could hold them warrants until they're paid, right?
Yeah, if they like the investment.
And they would get 5% interest on it, right?
That's right. Okay. My father did this throughout the state for many years, and he kept all of his warrants in a file cabinet at the office, and it was kind of like his retirement fund. They'd trickle in. You know, he'd have warrants that were like $140, and but he didn't care. He liked that kind of a steady stream. Well, I had kids in college, a car payment, a mortgage, and I really enjoy food, so I needed cash. I didn't have the luxury of letting it sit for an investment. As I get older, I wouldn't mind accumulating warrants. I think it's a very good investment.
Going back to Nick's question with regard to the accumulated interest. So Nick sits on this warrant for 10 years, and we're calculating the interest, but he hasn't received any. Is that right?
That's right. So he'll be paid the face amount of the warrant together with calculated interest when the warrant's paid off.
Okay, any more questions from Mr. Hudson?
Any estimate how long this project's going to take?
Well, we haven't even bid it yet. But that's coming up shortly, I believe, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We got to set the date next Tuesday, I think.
I'm not the engineer, but you know, I've seen enough of them. Depends on the construction season, if they can go out and work this winter, and it depends upon the schedule of the contractor. This project doesn't have any other funding. We have had projects where we had to spend money by a certain date or we would lose it, and so the engineer would put in the bid specs a completion date with like a per diem penalty if it wasn't completed. I don't see that, but it's not unusual to put a timeline on it. I don't think we're doing much except cleaning out a ditch and some minor improvements.
I think there's a 48-inch line and a bunch of laterals that are going to be built. It's
there's laterals and lines.
2.1 million. You're going to do more than clean out a ditch, I think.
Yeah. So I don't know if it takes any more work to bury a tile or it does to clean out a ditch. Probably a full year from now. If they got started this spring and worked through the summer and fall. And then once that's done, there'll be a completion hearing. We're not going to reclassify, so we won't have a classification hearing.
We are reclassifying.
Are we going to reclassify?
Yes.
Because we're
Well,
going to annex some extra territory in, too.
Yeah, I thought you just classified. So since we're annexing, we're reclassified. I'm sorry that I've lost track of what this project is. I remember the reclassification requires an investigation time period. Don has pre-classified it, so it won't take nearly as long at the end of the project. They'll tweak that pre-classification, but there'll be notice and hearing for that. So maybe be all done by next spring. I don't know if that's... I'm not a good person to ask that question about when it'll be done.
I would anticipate that if things went smoothly, it would not be done at least until the end of next year. And that would be pretty smooth.
That'd be optimistic, probably.
Okay, any more questions? Yes, Betty.
I got a question. If you happen to buy a warrant or hold a warrant and you pass away, does that warrant go on to the life of that, so the estate would not get that money?
Did you hear that, Don? Or Jim?
Yes, warrants are bearer paper, transferable, inheritable. Don't know whether, like if my dad did die with a packet full of warrants, and his will provided that his wife receive that type of investment, and so she now owns those warrants, and she sells real estate out of this office, and I know from time to time she'll get payments from counties, and they're being paid off. She could turn around and sell them if she wanted to. One time my father needed to borrow some money or acquire some money, and so he took a big handful of warrants, a big one, down to a local bank, and a couple of the officers of the bank liked them, and they figured out some sort of there was accumulated interest on them. They kind of computed that, and they negotiated a little bit. Dad sold them like a big chunk, like $20,000-$30,000. Because he had a need for money. But they pass on to the heirs.
But the estate would have to sell the warrants. You couldn't just call them due. You couldn't call the warrant due. The estate would have to sell.
I didn't hear that very well.
She wanted to know if the estate could call them due or whether they'd have to sell them if they wanted the money.
Well, they can't call them due per
Right.
se because they can't collect them until the landowner pays the assessment.
Correct.
So the estate, if they wanted to liquidate, could just turn right around and sell those warrants to an investor.
Yep. Okay. Any more questions? comments?
It's about like selling cash. Or
I'll
gold.
take the cash.
You know, I mean, they're pretty liquid and they're very secure. I don't sell them. I don't make any money on the sale of warrants, but I just want to assure you folks, because you don't have much experience or any experience with what I see happening up in this part of the state. You know, your treasurer will experience tax sales where people come in and fight like cats and dogs to buy up properties, to buy those tax sale certificates because they're secure and they draw good interest. These are a lot better than that even.
Okay, any more comments, questions? There isn't anything else. Jim, we thank you. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. I'm sorry about the starting delay.
Well, we get up in the morning. We're ready to go.
I tell people frequently I don't do anything until the dew dries, and the dew has been frozen for about 10 days up here.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Talk to you later.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye. What's the bankers think?
Well, 5% yield that you don't collect for 20 years is not 5%. And if you get in a 3% inflation category, you're talking about a negative yield. It's all about the value of money, the current value of money. So it's not comparable to a bond that at 3.5% that pays interest semi-annually or annually. So it's a clumsy process.
So am I hearing that you would not be interested in any?
I'm less interested than I was.
Okay.
Like the Shark Tank.
You know, they're due on demand. I mean, as an investor, Glenn's exactly right. They're payable the next day, and we would live with them without a cash flow for years and years.
And I don't understand the accounting part of it well enough to, you know, without us getting interest on an annual basis like we would with a bond or whatever. I'm not expert enough from our standpoint to figure out how that would work into my, again, cash flow wise. You know, I might get paid from it in 20 years, I might get paid from it in 3 years. I just don't have enough knowledge on them to make an adequate answer for you right now.
Nick?
Yeah, I'm all in if I can get warrant number 1, but I don't think that'd be fair with these guys over here.
Well, we would need to think about it, and it would seem to me that there's a better way to do this. It seems to me that the county, you know, in an anticipatory warrant, it's really just a check that the county wrote that they couldn't cover, stamped as a warrant, and we sat on it, and it's short term typically, and when we collect it at you know, it's under par because we earned some interest on it. This is a whole different deal. This is I got a Medicare card for Christ's sakes.
Would you be interested in talking to the bankers out there in Pocahontas or the county out there with?
Well, I can do the math, and the math is I'm likely not to get any cash flow for years. And our world is all about interest rate risk management. Granted, we more than likely don't have a credit risk, but I don't want to be involved in foreclosing on tax sales on farms either. So it just seems to me that the county could be. Who issues the warrants? It's a drainage district.
It's the auditor.
The auditor would issue it on behalf of the drainage district.
On behalf of them. So and then it's really a revenue type instrument because it's payable from the tax revenue on the respective farm, right? So here we are with a tax revenue, no idea when we're going to get our money. We know we're not going to get interest till we get our money. It seems to me that And in today's world, you know, we're competing with other non-taxed entities that some of these farmers probably can get money, 20-year money, in the 5% range. So, you know, you might have a lot more payoff than you anticipate. So it may not be as big of an issue as it sounds, but the uncertainty of us not knowing when we're going to get money makes it very difficult to manage interest rate risk, because we're in a historical low here. This thing's going to change. So my answer is I'm less interested now than I was.
But you're going to think about that.
I'm always thoughtful.
Well, and my understanding was that when we originally talked to this Jim Hudson was that, you know, we could say, okay, you got to take them to this bank or that bank to turn them in for money. Now he says that the contractor and himself, anybody who gets a warrant, they can do what they want with it. So we don't even have any control.
And that's why I'm saying that's extraordinarily clumsy. It would seem that the county, on behalf of the drainage district, writes a check to pay the contractor, and then we convert that check to a warrant. And the county has a mechanism to allocate that amongst all the holders of those warrants, and we get a pro rata payment, so we get some cash flow. It just seems like a better way to do it.
Bonding would be better, wouldn't it?
Well, I don't know if you
bonds?
need to do a bond, but it could be a negotiated loan, you know, without issuing a bond. But at the very least, we will need some legal opinion that this is tax exempt.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't be hard yet.
The federal tax exempt of it. Yeah. Not state, but federal.
Right.
Yeah. Anything else? We appreciate you coming in, and we'll keep you abreast of what's happening on it.
Okay.
You know, we're going to meet with and you're welcome to come back next Tuesday at, 10 o'clock? Don Eckler's going to be here, the engineer on this project, and he might even have some more information on it too, you know. He's not an attorney, but he is the engineer on this project. So at 10 o'clock next Tuesday here in the boardroom, Don Eckler will be here. So.
And before we do go out for bid, we'll probably want some, you know, sort of an answer from the folks that, you know, if you're interested in, if you were interested, but you're only interested if you get number one, you know, that's the type of information we need.
Could get number one for, say, $1.5 million. How's that?
Well, that's not
or $400.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just it. I mean, these the increments, you just have no clue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
And Gary's already bought some of the warrants because we've already accumulated some
We're
debt
already sitting on 130,000.
Yeah, that the county's already picked up. So Gary's got number one through I don't know what, you know.
20 of them in there or something like that.
Okay, well, we thank you.
When do we find
Thank
out
you
how
for
much
coming.
you
Yes,
want from us? You know, 2.1 million is, are you looking for 700 from? Well, obviously not, but 700,000 apiece. Or are you looking for, you know, how much is the county willing to come in on this? And are they sitting behind us? Are they sitting behind us, or are they sitting in front of us?
Well, that's what we're wanting to hear from Gary.
Yeah.
Well, we talked to the auditors yesterday, and they didn't really nix it, but according to our cash flow, it's not the best investment for the county.
So you're not planning on converting any CDs to this investment?
Our carryover this last year got knocked.
342,000.
Yeah, 340,000. Yeah, that for a couple of years in a row, then we're in trouble.
I understand, but that doesn't answer my question.
Well,
Well, it kind of does. I mean, if he can't, as a county public official, cannot depend on being able to market those. Interest rates could change dramatically in a couple of years.
we aren't gonna get any funds in or payback till, the way that sounds, the fall of 16. So you're looking at a good year and a half to two.
Year and a half, 2 years, almost 2 years from now.
Yeah, lines up in 5 years to 6%, and you need to convert those.
You're out of luck. I don't know, Pocahontas Banks might be looking pretty good, I'd say.
Well, we do need to think about it.
Yeah, understand that. And we appreciate you guys coming in and listening to it anyhow. Because we're not bankers, we're not financial experts here or anything, so.
We're trying to stay in the business.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. Good.
Okay, is there anything else to do in the Sandwich Drainage District? We have minutes or anything to approve? Okay, we got minutes from November 13th that was sent around. It was noted that Don Latter would like to change the date of the receiving of bidding documents from the 18th to the 25th. And we set that date, so.
Move to approve.
Okay, the motion's been made by Ellerhoff. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Kaufman. All in favor? Opposed? Minutes been approved. Is there anything else in the Stanwood Drainage District? So nothing more that I have at this time. So if there is nothing more, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn from the Stanwood Drainage District.
So moved.
Okay, the motion's been made by Ellerhoff. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Gal. Roll call. Ellerhoff.
Aye.
Gal.
Aye.
Bell.
Aye.
Kaufman.
Aye.
Dearborn, aye. We're back into regular session. Is there anything else in the regular session? You want to check the mail? 10 o'clock?
Well prepared.
There's no mail yet.
No mail yet? Okay, is there anything else to come for the meeting? If there is nothing else, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion's been made by Ellerhoff, second by Kaufman. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Good on you.